this is Outside the Box. Standing by to join me is Zane Landin. He's a disability advocate, writer, a recent graduate of Cal Poly Pomona, and he was also part of the MTV Mental Health Youth Action Forum that just went to DC. And I'm so excited to have him on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dean, for having me. I'm really excited to talk about everything you want to talk about.
Well, you have such an interesting background. I found you because you were a participant for
Mhm.
the Mental Health Youth Action Forum. You interned at NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. That's super cool. Why don't we talk about that first?
Absolutely, sure. All right, let's start. So for me, I've done a lot of different internships. I thought that they were good introductory because I really didn't know where I wanted to go. And especially, again, I'll give some context. I'm a
Yeah.
communications graduate. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Communication. There's a lot of places you can go with that. And I think that for the longest time, I always struggled on what I wanted to do. What career am I interested in? And then I finally decided, I was like, I want to be a storyteller, I want to be a communicator. I learned about communications from a mentor of mine, and I was just really passionate about it. And I had been for a while. I just never knew you could actually create a career out of it. Then a new problem came about, which was, what does that mean? What kind
Yeah.
of communicator? There's science communicators, there's arts communicators, there's mental health communicators, health communicators. There's literally any function, anything you can think about as a communicator. So I was a little stuck again. So I want to do different internships. And interesting enough, I'll be honest, when I actually discovered the internship that I did with NASA, it's called the Universe Public Engagement Internship. I actually found out about it around 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. And I don't see many internships like that at JPL or NASA. A lot of them are, going to be engineering or,
Mhm.
the STEM, fields. And so
Right.
when I saw it, I was just really excited about it. I was like, this seems like an incredible opportunity, a way to bring in science and storytelling, which is something we definitely need right
Yes.
now. And unfortunately, I waited months. Like every day I was like waiting for an email, but they emailed me saying that they just weren't going to fill the position, that it wasn't a good time.
Okay.
And so I kind of forgot about it, and years later, last summer I completed an internship at General Motors, and we can talk about that after that is this, but I loved the experience and I wanted to do a fall internship. And I actually had an interview for a Disney internship for marketing and communications intern. And while I was like kind of in the process of that, I saw that the NASA position was open again. And so
Mm.
I was like, this position was here 2.5 years ago. It's the exact job description. Like I remember this. And so I told myself, no, I have my heart set on Disney. I know Disney's where I'm going to be. It just
Okay.
felt like everything aligned with Disney.
Yeah.
And then, but then I think there was one night where I was like, no, 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 what am I thinking? Apply for it. Who knows what's going to happen? Just apply. It's something I've always wanted. So I should go for it. And that's what I did. I applied for it. And then everything unraveled with Disney, where I did the interviews, and then unfortunately they actually didn't tell me. I just found out online that I wasn't accepted. That was on a Thursday, and I was, upset about it. But then what was really interesting was the next day, Friday, NASA emailed me saying we're interested in moving forward, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
okay. That was I didn't think about it at the time, but
Mhm.
looking back in retrospect, it's like, wow, it really felt like it was designed that way.
Yes.
And so like it was the universe at play, like
Yes.
pun intended, but
No, it's
it
true.
really felt like that, right?
Although
And
I like
so
the pun.
yeah. So I think I was just super excited about the entire thing, and it was so quick. Like they hired really fast. And so anyways, it was just such a great opportunity. I think the main thing that helped me get the job at NASA was, I think that the General Motors internship was a huge step because they like made sure to help me create a portfolio. So
Mhm.
all the work that I did at General Motors that summer was in a presentation portfolio, which
Oh,
not a lot of interns do. And so to track almost everything that you are doing. And so when they asked, the first thing NASA asked me was fill out this questionnaire with questions about your experience. And one of them was about what's your most rewarding work experience. I mentioned General Motors, and I was like, and here is my portfolio. So you can check out every single thing I did at General Motors. And it had everything on it. It had the impact, it had what I was tasked to do, and what I personally did. And so I think that helped a lot. So
that's
key
great.
giveaways, for students, make sure you have a portfolio when you're in a work environment, even if it's internship. Definitely always have a portfolio that you can, you know,
Showcase.
yeah, just showcase what you've done and the impact that you've made and the roles that you've had. So I think that
Yeah.
helped a lot. And overall, it was just a great experience. I never thought I'd be doing communications and PR for NASA, and I was specifically doing it for astrophysics and exoplanets, which were really exciting. And I'm not an expert, so I of course can't answer everything on that. But I learned so much about exoplanets and the different missions at NASA, not in as much detail as I wish,
Hmm.
but as much as I should know as a communicator. And it's just so exciting, some of the work that's happening there and what they've done, and just kind of baffles me how big the universe is. And I was always fascinated with the universe, but learning about it from the back end like this, it's incredible, some of the stuff that they're doing. And I actually got to work with scientists who went to Antarctica for
Wow.
months to work on a mission. Like,
Hmm.
that is stuff I never thought I would hear. I thought, or
So
experience. I
cool.
thought that was something that you see in the movies. You see
Yeah,
scientists going out to these really cold areas and doing experiments. I was like, oh, that's
exactly.
all sci-fi stuff. No, we actually got to meet scientists who had very similar experiences doing something like that. And I was like, wow, it's like it can be really intimidating being in the same room as some of these people. But they were always very respectful of us, and it was an inclusive environment. So
That's great.
it was a really cool experience.
That is amazing. Now, was this before the pandemic or
No, it
right at the
was
beginning?
no, this was like after, because like I interned at General Motors the summer of 2020. No, the summer of 2021. I interned at General
Okay,
Motors, so I did the NASA internship from October of 2021 till I recently finished it. So yeah,
that's great. All in person?
no, it was all virtual.
Virtual. Okay. But did you get to go and see any of the techie stuff or no?
No, not really.
All right.
But it was still meaningful work, and
Oh,
I'm
sure.
really happy with the team and what they were able to do, and
Yeah,
how they were able to engage me in all the projects that they had me do.
that is fascinating. Wow, bravo.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
in hindsight, um, I mean, I don't know about you, but it sounds like that was a better choice for you instead of Disney.
yeah. Definitely
Yeah,
had a better alignment.
yeah, yeah. It's funny. I remember years ago wanting to work for Disney,
Mhm.
and also I got an interview at DreamWorks, and they had just opened, and I was so excited. I was so excited that when they called me, I was in Connecticut at the time, just visiting my dad, and they called and they said, "Oh, are you going to be out in California at all?" And I said, "Oh, next week." So, so I booked a ticket, went out. The position was really too junior, and
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
both of us like realized like no, it just wasn't the right fit. It was like a junior research position, and I was finishing my doctorate. So I
Oh,
declined. And when I went to interview for Disney, I was in the waiting room, and this girl who was really sick, she brings me into the interview. She says, "Oh, this place will chew you up and spit you out." And as I'm walking in, I'm thinking, really? Like, it made me so nervous to accept anything. And again, that position didn't feel right either.
mhm.
And even though it's a name, it's an incredible name, you have to really think before you make that kind of decision.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, in any company or any culture, you might experience different team dynamics. And I know a lot of people will go, oh, well, Disney's a great place to work, as well as Google and Microsoft are
Oh, yeah.
great places. But you have to remember that different teams have their own functions and their own cultures,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
team can definitely make or break you. And so her
Exactly.
experience could be the team, it could be the whole company for her. But it's
Yes.
really interesting how sometimes they'll look at that and look at the great reviews, but that doesn't account for certain teams that may not
Exactly.
perform in an appropriate way.
Exactly. So tell me about how you became part of the MTV Mental Health Youth Action Forum.
Yeah, yeah, oh my goodness. I remember discovering it in December, either December or November. And I was already connected to an organization called Active Minds, which is like a student mental health organization. They have chapters across the nation, and they're
Hmm.
all about just breaking the stigma of mental health. And I got really involved in that organization. I restarted the chapter at my university. And so I was already really connected with the organization. They're one of the organizations that partnered with the Youth Action Forum. So because they did that, they posted about it. So that's where I first saw it. And I was like, oh, I'm applying for this. I mean, it's about mental health, it's about media,
Yes.
and it's about youth. And so a lot of different things that I identified with and, resonated with, I wanted to be a part of. So I
Amazing.
was really nervous to apply. And I think there was another layer of nerves because the application was not extensive. The application was very minimal. I think
Oh,
that they asked like 3 questions, and like each question you had like 100 words or
that's it?
150 or 150. Yeah, they didn't ask for a lot. And so they asked like 150 words per each question. They asked like what organizations you're part of. They asked that you can submit optional things, like optional documents. And they said if you want, you can submit a resume. You don't have to. I'm like, I'm submitting a resume. Like I need to have some material here because
Definitely.
it felt so bare bones just to have just a couple of questions. So
Yes.
I can't imagine how hard it was to determine from like such like a it wasn't a lot of information from each person. So I thought it was interesting
Mhm.
how they did that. Maybe they did that on purpose though. And
Maybe
so,
to see how
yeah.
elaborate you would be in your
Mhm.
response.
And also, I think there's like a gift of writing, in a compelling story in a very short format.
Yes.
So if you can write a compelling story in 50 words, that's better than writing a compelling story that's too long for someone to digest, especially as it comes to stuff like this and media
Right.
and mental health. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I submitted my application. I didn't hear back till around was it the end of January, I think. I'm not sure on the exact timeline, but they emailed me, and this is a piece of advice I always give people: is check your junk mail. I
Yes.
check my spam every single day because of reasons like this. I think it was like 11 or 12 at night, and I was looking through my spam, and it said, "Oh, you're a semifinalist for the Mental Health Youth Action Forum," and like I just kind of convinced myself at that point that I didn't get it. Not when I received the email, but
Yes.
like
But you
from
hadn't
the
heard back.
yeah, I was like, okay, it was such a long shot. It's fine. So I was, really excited to see that email because I was like, I kind of forgot about this, and
Yeah.
I thought it was not a possibility for me. So I don't remember if I applied that night or if I think I took like 1 or 2 weeks to think about what I was going to say. But again, the application was not extensive. It asked a
Hmm.
couple of questions and it even asked some pretty like interesting, lighthearted ones, like what is your favorite TV show about mental health? So they asked some pretty interesting questions. But I think what helped me the most and what helped me stand out was I had a long list of speaking engagements. I've spoken on several podcasts about mental health and
Hmm.
the digital magazine. I know that you wanted to talk about that, so I think it's a good segue to
I
bring
would
up.
love to.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that helped me a lot was something I started, something that I had ownership of. So in May of 2020, when the pandemic first started, I was taking a copy editing class for my major, and he wanted us to do a final project on create our own publication using specific articles that he had. So would we put those articles in our publication? So I actually started off with a like a urban legends for kind of magazine, and so I thought urban legends would be really interesting, but it had to be completely fictional or nonfiction. And so I was like, I don't think he would qualify this as fiction or
Okay.
nonfiction. And so I decided, something I've been thinking about was just a lot of the mental health decline I was seeing in waves. I was seeing a lot of people, a lot of places, communities experiencing this wave of, mental health conditions and issues much more than we've probably seen in a long time. And I thought that this was an exceptional opportunity to have a conversation about mental health, and I wanted to start it. And I'm
Okay.
not saying that it wasn't happening because it was definitely happening in different places, but
Right.
I wanted to start my own. Like I wanted to start the conversation in my space, in my community, on what I wanted it to see. Because
Good.
there was definitely tons of organizations doing important work on this, but I was inspired by that, and also I was also, inspired by the mainstream media. Inspired not in the best way. What I mean is, I was inspired by their lack of mental health coverage,
Hmm.
and that's something I've seen with the mainstream media for a long time, as well as media in general. A lot of the discourse on mental health isn't the best, may not be the most accurate,
Hmm.
the most human either. I think sometimes mental health is treated or painted as like medical condition that is violent or awful, and there's no human component of what it really is. It's not that. It's more
Right.
than that.
Yeah.
That is such a like that's really a very black and white stereotype of it. I think the media has portrayed that and perpetuated it for a long time. So I thought that we were all experiencing mental health in isolation. There were
Yes.
people who were we've all experienced mental health because everyone has mental health, but there were some people that were experiencing a decline in their mental health that they've never experienced in their life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were experiencing that. So I think it was a great opportunity to break the barriers and just have the conversation. And it was a shame that the mainstream media didn't, hold the conversation or the space, and they still, I see they still don't. They'll hold conversations or they'll do, reportings, but I would love to see a dedicated space to it. And so through the work I'm doing with the magazine, I would love it if there was like a CNN or Fox News thing on like
Sure.
mental health. That's
Ongoing.
it.
Yeah.
Ongoing, like even if it's just a mental health segment, that's all it is. Like a half an hour show of the day is all
Hmm.
about mental health news.
Hmm.
And that could be like 20 minutes of news and 40 minutes of an interview with an expert who talks about, there's so many topics. I mean, you could talk about holistic mental health, anxiety, the symptoms. You could talk about everything, the shame, the stigma. There's so many things that, or even like mental health history, stuff that we don't hear about. So that's why I love for it to become. Anyways, so I decided to actually pursue the magazine as a real thing. So we
Great.
started off with an Instagram channel because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to start, what to do. So I just started off with little postings about inspirational quotes, about desserts or crystals, like the most random stuff, stuff that I enjoyed seeing. And then it just kind of morphed into something else because we had someone reach out who wanted to be interviewed because we were just writing blogs at that point, and we only wrote two. And so we had someone reach out who's a life coach that he wanted to share his story. And I never thought that I would turn into that. And so my friend interviewed him, we released his story, and then after that, we've shifted the focus to focus on people storytelling and community building and
Good.
community-based storytelling to make sure that we're talking with people who are making a real difference in their communities, and also do not shy away of having these raw, unfiltered conversations about whatever it is that they've experienced. And I try my best to hold this space for them to talk about that. And I think what I wouldn't say what makes the digital magazine different, but the storytelling, we try our best to be different because we're telling their story in the way that they want.
Hmm.
And we always make sure it's their story. So
That's great.
every single time we interview someone, we make sure we send it to them like, does this look good? You cannot be misquoted here.
That's great.
Because we don't want, it's your story and you own it. We're just kind of the catalyst here.
Yes.
And so yeah, so I'm just really proud of the magazine. I think that's what really helped me land my place in the Mental Health Youth Action Forum, because the magazine has put me in places I wouldn't have been otherwise, working with PR firms, working with mental health advocates, working with organizations that I wouldn't have if I didn't do the magazine. So I think the magazine is one of the sole reasons that I was chosen for the forum, because without it, I wouldn't be an advocate as much as I was when I applied, and even stronger now. So it all kind of just came together.
It's amazing. When did the magazine start officially? What year? 2021?
May of 2020.
So you think about that, that was only a few months into the pandemic, right? And one thing you talked about is people have really been showing signs of mental health struggles. And
Mhm.
and the book I'm working on, I talk about how we already had a crisis, a mental health crisis, and the pandemic only exacerbated it with all the pre-existing issues. And then the people that were struggling only were struggling even more so
Yeah.
in the pandemic. And I agree with you about the media. You know, I feel that a lot of times for me it's frustrating because I hear um, that now people are talking about it, but they're not talking about it with solutions. They're just talking about it like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, we have a mental health crisis. But as Jessica said, who was in the panel we just did the other day, she said to me, well, so what? We have all this data. So what are we going to do with it?
Yeah,
Excellent point.
it's completely true. I mean, it's one thing to point out a problem because that's, I mean, I think for some, especially mental health and like disability, it takes courage to point out the problem because a lot of people don't want to hear the problem.
Yeah.
So it must be even harder to find a solution for people who have already resisted that problem. And so I think that, I'm glad that they're pushing the barriers of talking about mental health, because for the longest time, even identifying it as a problem was, you know, a very hard and challenging thing to do. And I agree. I think that there is a lot of data on mental health. I just don't think people are 100% there yet, which is an unfortunate thing, which is why I'm
Right.
hoping like things like the Mental Health Youth Action Forum and just so many more advocates coming out and talking about mental health, especially my generation, like Gen Zers, who are really, paving the way for mental health conversations. I think hopefully in the very near future, politicians and government and media are going to be ready to embrace it. Because if they don't, I don't think it's going to be a good thing.
Right. And Salima too, who was on the panel. We talked about making meaning from adversity with Mallory.
Mhm,
She was saying that, this is your future,
mhm,
right? So you've inherited the problems from previous people. And she's so wonderful and outspoken because this is her future, your future. And one of the
mhm,
things I love about your generation is you're very outspoken on things where normally people would just be filled with apathy, and they wouldn't talk about mental health, and some people feel uncomfortable saying I need a mental health day,
mhm.
or um, anything. So I really
Yeah.
admire your generation, which is why I wanted to write my book. And this series, it's very interesting. We were talking earlier. I feel like there are gatekeepers that
Mhm,
keep this series from moving forward and touching the lives of students.
mhm.
And one of the reasons I put this together was because a lot of students were reaching out to me saying, "Can you talk to me? I lost my job and my internship. I'm really struggling." And of course, I'm going to say yes. And it's really important to not assume what somebody is offering, right? If I talk about this series, to give people a chance, because this series this summer has just been really engaging and impactful. And I've just enjoyed every minute, and I just want to get the word out. Yeah,
No, I think that's great. And like I said before, yeah, good luck. And I think universities should embrace this. And if not, at least hopefully start hosting their own conversations though on mental health, so students can
exactly.
have the space to do that. And I see a lot of universities that, for one, it's already hard enough to get mental health resources because they may not have enough psychologists on site, and they
They
may not
don't.
have enough.
They
Yeah.
don't have enough psych because there's huge need.
Hmm.
I mean,
And
Zane, you
that's
think
a
about it. Yeah.
and it's a university, but it's also just a need of the industry because there's just a decline of people going into mental health
Or
work.
who have left the profession.
And I don't blame them. I understand
Yeah.
why. It's a very hard thing to do. Same with like social work. They have to it's a lot of work that they have to do. So, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to that work. I'm not going to become a mental health practitioner or a mental health professional. I want to be a communicator that communicates about mental health. That's different.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I commend people who definitely
Right.
who even just in the world of medicine, who go into the world of medicine because of how hard it has been, especially for, like you said, especially during
Right.
the pandemic. But I agree that,
Healthcare. Yeah.
yeah, but I agree before what you said, like the pandemic, there was always a mental health epidemic, and the pandemic just kind of accelerated those
It did.
disparities, which makes sense. But what's so interesting about what you said before, though, and I didn't even think about this, but at the very beginning of the pandemic of May of 2020, people were already experiencing huge hardship, even in 2 months in.
Right.
And that is really interesting. And I think I can't believe that too. That's right. Because when I started the magazine, it was May, and I was already feeling really bad, and there was just so much despair in the world. And that was only in 2 months. And
Right.
so,
Well, think
yeah,
about it. There was a huge number. I don't know if you saw this number, but somebody told me there were like 40 million people out of work.
mhm,
So you think about that. And then you have, I mean, the New York Times did an entire section on mothers impacted by the pandemic, an 18-page section about how hard it is to be a mom in the pandemic because you're juggling work, you're at home, maybe you're homeschooling, maybe you've lost somebody, you've
mhm,
lost your job, maybe, or it's at risk. You don't know how you're going to make ends meet. Your financial situation was already not good anyway. Maybe you're a single parent. Um, you know, maybe you're a minority. Maybe there's so many factors, right? Yeah.
yeah. No, oh my goodness. Yeah, I agree. I think the pandemic did definitely highlight some of these issues and
Yeah.
able for us to see that they were worsened. And also, I think it's also a good opportunity to like say that the pandemic did some good, and
Yeah.
that even though it was a hard time, it definitely, you know, motivated people to fight for injustice more than they
I
ever have
agree.
before in a way.
Yes.
And I think that there are more people talking about mental health, maybe on not on a national scale like the mainstream media, but people in their homes, in their four screens, they were starting to talk about it more. And even
Yes.
though we were isolated, it was still good to see people connect on that front.
Yes. I went to a peaceful protest. I I think it was 2021, It was after the death of George Floyd,
Mhm.
and it was it was a very important experience for me. I had never been to this type of protest, and plus, it was horrific what happened to him, to say the least. And that there were a lot of people your age, a lot of Gen Z at the mic. We had a moment of silence, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people. It was so powerful. I was so glad I went. And it just definitely gave me a moment of pause. Like I remember being in my I work out of my bedroom, and my daughter's like, "Will you come with me? I'm making a poster." And I'm like, "Sure." So it's like work wasn't that important, it just like it put things in perspective for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is really interesting.
Yeah.
I think also the pandemic like kind of forced us to like reflect on everything. And so there were a lot of people that had to come to terms with who they were, their beliefs.
Yeah.
And I also think that partly the George Floyd incident was so impactful was because of the pandemic. I'm
Right.
not saying that it wasn't horrific, but there have been cases that were almost as bad as that,
Yeah.
but did not get the attention that it did. And I think that's because
Right.
people were stuck in their thoughts and having
Yeah.
to just see
Yes.
horrible after horrible, and that was kind of the breaking point.
Right.
And I really do think if it wasn't for the pandemic, I don't know if it would have received as much attention as it did.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. I was also saying to someone, and I've been writing about this, how um, you have the climate activist,
Hmm.
why am I blanking on her name, who came from, I'm blanking on her name. You know what I'm talking about? She was like,
Greta Thunberg,
yes, Greta Thunberg. Okay,
like
so
the only activist I know.
okay, so she came from her country, and I'm thinking the magnitude of an impact she made. I mean, students that all over the world, adults, they were walking out, especially students, they were doing walkouts in New York, all over the world. I'm thinking, I wish people would do that for mental health, right?
Hmm. No, I
Because
wish that
yeah,
too.
yeah, because one of the things I feel that teachers have had a horrible time in the pandemic. And I read a number that over 300,000 teachers since 2020 have left the profession.
Mm.
300,000. And for so many reasons that are valid, but STEAM and STEM are a priority, but mental health is not. It's not across the curriculum across all schools. There might be mental health week once a week
Mhm.
in a whole year, and I feel that, and other students have said this, if you don't prioritize mental health, where are you as an adult? Where are you in college? You're nowhere, right? Doesn't matter if you get all A's and you ace your APs and your scores and whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it would be great to see a walkout for mental health, and I don't know why there hasn't been, especially when you see things like your classmate dying by suicide.
Yeah.
To me, that's enough to have a walkout. But I think maybe why people haven't is because every single time a suicide happens, yes, the school system does its best to support their students in that time of need. But other than that, there's not a focus on mental health. And it's interesting, like people, when I hear about suicide, and they go, yes, take the time for your mental health. Yeah, right now. But then in a week or two, when everything goes away again, people are experiencing this and there's not going to be attention on it.
Right.
So that's another thing I find interesting too is I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. There's always attention put on these issues when something horrible has to happen.
Yeah.
But it's sad that it's not an ongoing process,
It has to
especially with
be
mental health.
preventative. It
That
has to
too.
be preventative, right? It has to be this ongoing thing. And
Mhm.
and one of the things I'm a proponent of and the work I'm doing are preventative initiatives. And they could be student run, not adults telling you what to do, but peer-to-peer initiatives. And yes, if there's something really horrible going on, you go to that counselor, but this will deflect the workload on a counselor. And let's say peers can come together on different initiatives, on different things that are impacting them. But if mental health is an ongoing initiative throughout the year, then it's not something that you're trying to catch up on, right?
Mhm.
When something awful happens.
Yeah, I think it's important to because like a lot of times it's a lot of the mental health that I see is a lot of reactive responses
Yes,
instead of being proactive,
right.
because if you think about it, we need to be proactive so someone doesn't die by
Yeah.
suicide.
Right.
Because and they happen all the time. That's what people don't get. They still think that suicide is a taboo. It's like, oh, this person almost died by suicide. We'll get them help, and we don't talk about it again. When actually, no, let's keep talking about it actually because, you know, it happens all the time. When you look at how many people attempt suicide for every completed,
Yes.
it's millions of people. And so
Right.
I think that again, having more conversations about it is good, especially people who have suicidal thoughts, because a lot of people don't share that they have. I have, and I think that that's not abnormal. I think it's actually a very normal thing to think, but for
Hmm.
some reason, we think it's so out there and so like so different that we feel alone in our thoughts, and we don't want to bring it up because we really think it's something people don't think about. But I think a lot of people think about
Yeah.
ending their life or just the thought of it or just
Yeah.
even I don't want to be alive anymore. There's a lot of things that people think,
Yeah.
but for some reason society has treated it as if it's like an outlier.
Right. No, I agree with you. And the pandemic, even for adults, have brought up past trauma,
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, you think about all the people that had to go and seek therapy, and there weren't enough therapists, especially for adults. Yeah.
And then another thing, well, I'll bring up the mental health youth action forum again.
Hmm.
One of the things that we definitely talked about a lot was, just trying to engage more people of color to become mental health practitioners.
Love that.
And
Good.
so, and it makes sense though. I mean, for me, like I personally wouldn't care what race or gender my doctor is because it's just a human body.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion. I know some people don't agree with that, but also personally, I would care maybe what my race or gender my mental health practitioner is because to my doctor I'll tell them about just my health and my background, but with a mental health practitioner, you might be telling them really deep stuff. And
Yeah.
so if you can find someone that you resonate with that maybe looks like you may already have, already a bond there that they understand. You don't have to explain how it feels to experience racism,
Right.
to someone who doesn't get it. And I think it's exhausting to have to explain what that really feels like to someone who may not fully grasp what it means. So it may be
Yes.
easier for someone who can like kind of resonate with who they're talking to. So that's just another a way of you know that would be just that's like a good example of why more people of color and queer folks and people with disabilities should go into mental health work, just to make it more of a diverse, inclusive,
Oh, I agree.
community.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation? Maybe specifically, what has helped you through the challenges the past 3 years?
Yeah, I will say one of the hardest times I did mention, during the panel, my mom passed away in January of 2021.
Mm.
So I think that although the pandemic was hard from the beginning to that point, it was okay because my mom was still around. And so she was always my huge support system. So every time I needed something, I would always go to her. And I know not everybody has that, but I will say try and find your own community. There's so many organizations that need support. This is I always say this. It's probably like a broken record at this point, but there are people that don't have a community, and my suggestion is, unfortunately, you might have to find one yourself, and that could be just volunteering for an organization or signing up to attend an event or something like a virtual event. Who knows who you're going to be able to connect with?
Sure.
Because for some people, they may not have anyone. I think, unfortunately, it's hard, but I think that they may have to put in that work to find their community, um, to find that support system. So when January of 2021 happened, it was just horrible for everyone in my family. It was something we weren't expecting. It wasn't something that we were made aware of. Because there's some families that can grieve early because they know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, but for us, it was completely random. We had no idea it was going to happen, and yeah, it was definitely hard. And I think that was the worst part of the pandemic. And it wasn't even due to COVID. It wasn't, I
Mm.
mean, it's not like that would have mattered, but it wasn't due to COVID. And I think that that's actually, we were kind of lucky that it wasn't COVID because everyone in the ICU had COVID except my mom. And they tested her for COVID. She didn't have it. So we were able to actually visit her,
Oh,
which
that's good.
it was. So we were able to, see her body, you know. And so that was definitely hard. But I try and look at the light and that I was I was definitely in a good place to do that because a lot of people did not have the opportunity to do that. A lot of
Mm.
people kind of had to say goodbye virtually, which
Right.
is I can't really imagine that. And so I was lucky enough for that. And I think things like the magazine helped me because I was able to still contribute to mental health, but also kind of put myself in a position I'm not usually in. So what I mean
Mhm.
is, so the magazine is all about positivity, true, like positive storytelling, and that doesn't mean it's all happy and sunshines, but
Right.
it we confront ourselves, and
Yeah.
so we can be positive and use the tool of positivity. And I think that helps me because I write a lot of this stuff, like the postings that we do help me a lot because it's all about recognizing the positive and also the negative. Because in actuality, I'm actually a very negative person.
Oh, you are?
That sounds awful, I know, but I mean, like, that doesn't mean like I'm harsh or anything, but like my personal life, when
Hmm.
someone gives me a compliment, I will tell myself they're just being nice. So that's what I mean
Yeah.
by how I'm a negative. It's not like how I'm
I
not saying
know, I hear you.
I'm not saying I'm a downer, but
Yeah.
like every opportunity, I'm always gonna see. Well, it's probably because this reason or this reason. It's
Yeah.
never like, oh, it's just a positive experience. It's always there's something else going on. So that's what I mean. I don't mean like I'm this huge downer.
It's
But
almost like imposter syndrome, like you just don't
yeah,
think you're deserving of the accolades.
yeah. And what's funny though is I love supporting people and others and being very, positive about their journey. But when it comes to mine, it's very hard. I think a lot of people can resonate with that because
Yes.
I think a lot of people feel that way. We're always our own worst enemies, which is completely true. So that's
Yeah.
what I mean by, being negative. And so by the magazine challenges me to think a different way and see the world in a different light.
Good.
And also embrace that kind of, that kind of lifestyle and mindset. So I think that's what helped a lot. And just staying busy helped
Yes.
me because
Yes.
I think that helped a lot. I know like not everyone's busy, but I was involved in so much that even though I was able to grieve in my own way, I still had a lot of good distractions. And
Yes.
so I feel for my family because like a lot of my family members weren't really doing a lot, you know, and so I would see them just sulking in the depression, and I saw them getting
Yeah.
worse and worse, and eventually they were able to, find themselves again. But it was definitely hard to see, and I was lucky enough that I had that, and I also had a partner that was, there for me through everything, especially
Right.
especially for that because he already experienced that. He's a lot older than me, so he
Hmm.
already experienced losing both parents. So he knew the
Wow.
process. He knew how it felt. And
Yeah.
so that day that we found out and went to see her body after, I just went with him and he supported me the whole day. And
Amazing.
um, yeah, so that again, I was pretty fortunate to have a lot of these things, but
Mhm.
it's still hard.
Of course.
And I know there are some people that argue that grieving is like a some people argue that grieving is a process or it's the grieving period does end. You can believe that if I know some people really believe that. And if you
I
believe that
don't think it
that's
ends.
I don't think it does either.
No.
But for people that believe that, you can believe that if that's what you believe. But for me, I
Yeah.
think it's something that's always there. And I don't think that time does anything. I know some people go, oh, things get better with time. I disagree. I mean, I've only been grieving not too long, but still, I don't think that time is going to make it easier. I just think it's going to make it less unbearable. Does that make sense?
Completely, because I lost a friend of mine in 2010 and I was horrified. It was so unexpected. I was shocked. I was told it was suicide.
Mm,
I took a year off from radio. I decided I wanted to do something really meaningful and do a talk show. I was a DJ, and the talk show would be Get the Funk Out, and
mm,
I would talk about what I was going through, but I'd give a platform to other people. So what I hear you saying is like when you're creating something, it's a way for you to put your grief into something positive,
mhm.
and you're giving people a place, to shine and share, and in the time that we've struggled in the past few years, that's a wonderful thing. um so for me, it was writing, it was radio, it was really helpful, really.
You know what's so interesting about this is I think when there's like in times of need, you never know what you're capable of.
Oh yeah.
There's a beautiful quote, and one of them is like when you're at your worst point, the most opportunity happens, which I think is
Mm,
really interesting. And so you hear about so many people during the pandemic that started organizations, that started podcasts,
yeah.
I mean, look at Jessica, who was on the panel. She started this organization because,
Her
of her.
grandmother. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like when we in these dire times of need, some of us can shine and create some of the most wonderful things. And luckily, I've been able to connect with so many people who created things during the pandemic and
Yeah.
use this space of what a lot of people deemed as this horrible negative space. They were able to turn into like this positive experience, and
Yes. Yes.
those are the people that inspire me. Those are the true leaders, and they're not necessarily in the media. They're not necessarily these big influencers, but they're the everyday people who are making change, and that's who I love seeing.
That's
And I wish
amazing.
you would see more of that. I wish you would see more
Oh,
everyday
I
people on the
agree.
news.
I agree. I think we need a different type of network, like that.
Yeah.
There's no negative news. It's only like this positive news. And one thing I want to tell you was, so in 2015, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and I've always loved to write, and I thought I would write a book at one point. And I remember he was going from Connecticut to Florida, and he thought that some doctor would be able to just operate, and they couldn't. So he passes away in December 2015. And I remember taking the eulogy that I wrote, because I had to write it on the plane on my way to Florida.
Mm.
And I added some humor because he had this crazy sense of humor. He was like a real hard ass at times, a workaholic, worked in New York, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember putting in just a lighthearted sense of him, because I also got into voiceover because of him. He used to do these crazy characters one time when I was 18 on the plane. And I'm like, I didn't even know him because I didn't live with him growing up all the time.
Mm.
So I'm sharing this with you because when I was traveling back to California, I decided when I got home, I would type this up and submit it to the New York Times, because they have a section, The Lives We Loved.
Mm.
That's what it's called. And it's still up there. And I got home, literally got off the plane, typed this up, and submitted this cute picture of my dad and I when I was like 4, face to face. Our mouths are open. I'll have to send it to you. It's so cute. I had this awful bowl head haircut, and I submitted it, and they accepted it. And I was like, I need to be a writer. Like, that's really what I want to do. I really want to write. And so back to your point, like, you just don't know what will happen from
Mhm.
a really dark time. You might just discover yourself.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I think people do, because when you grieve, you're like reevaluating yourself in the relationship of what you've had, what you
Hmm.
wish you had. And I think that makes you definitely learn a lot about yourself. And for some people might create something, and that doesn't you don't need to be a certain person. Like, you don't
Yeah.
need to be a super creative person. That's the thing
No.
that I think is interesting too, is it's not just the creative people that experience this. It's these people who have, like you said, may not have been a writer, or never wanted to be a writer, never thought about it, and then all of a
Right.
sudden it's like an epiphany. And
Yes.
so my piece of advice is just embrace that. If you're
Yeah.
feeling uncertain and you're feeling like maybe I need to do something different, I would embrace that,
Yeah.
and see where that can lead you. Doesn't mean drop everything you're doing. But,
Right.
explore this new side that you may have never thought was there.
Yes. Yeah. I know, if you have this little tidbit of an idea, maybe spend 30 minutes on it at night, because that 30 minutes could turn into 2 hours.
Oh my goodness. And then, yeah, and you never know where that's gonna lead you. Like if you're starting an organization, or if you write something, or like you
Yeah.
said, just submitting something you wrote
Hmm.
to New York Times. And without you doing that, who knows how different your life would be now. You never, it's interesting.
Right. Right. Where can people find out more about you?
Sure. I mean, you have my name, Zane Landin. You can find my personal Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm really active on them if you ever want to chat about anything. And then the magazine is Positive Vibes Mag. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn. And our website is positivevibesmag.com. If you're interested in being featured, let me know. And then, please check out our articles and what we post. We're always trying to break the chains of, or the bondage of mental health that we can't
Yes.
that's hard to free ourselves from because of societal expectations and just people. And so
Yes.
that's what we're trying to do. So I hope you enjoy it, and reach out if you ever need anything.
Fantastic. Thank you. This has been great. Always great to talk to you, Zane.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for having me.
My pleasure.